Today from the global lane, President Trump tweets up a storm about Spygate. We'll tell you what secret documents and emails now reveal about campaign collusion. Singer Kelly Clarkson says moments of silence aren't working. So what can be done immediately to help end mass school shootings? You thought it was yours. Just how private is your genetic information? We set it straight on DNA samples taken from American babies without parental permission. These stories and more. And it's all right here, right now from the global lane. Iran policy was the subject of Mike Pompeo's first major foreign policy address as U.S. Secretary of State. First, he explained why President Trump dumped out of the Iranian nuclear deal.
It failed to guarantee the safety of the American people from the risk created by the leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. No more. No more wealth creation for Iranian kleptocrats. No more acceptance of missiles landing in Riyadh and the Golan Heights. No more cost-free expansions of Iranian power. No more. The JCPOA put the world at risk because of its fatal flaws.
Even before President Trump decided to run for office, he said that this nuclear deal was from the very get-go a very, very bad deal, full of flaws. What were some of those major flaws?
Matter of fact, George, you said it was the worst deal that the United States had ever negotiated. Some of those flaws, one of the main concerns was after 10 years, Iran could start up its nuclear program again, and it's already well on its way, so it wouldn't take long for them to actually acquire a nuclear device. But also the inspections. The inspections were not allowed on military facilities, military bases, so they could just do all their nefarious things on those bases. In addition to that, they had 24 hours or 24 days where they could delay an inspection. That's plenty of time to play the old shell game. Now you see it, now you don't. Move it from here, move it over there. So those were some of the main concerns, but also the fact that there was no linkage. There was no linkage to Iranian behavior in the Middle East and around the world. They could continue to support terrorism in Yemen and Lebanon and Syria against Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and so forth without being punished, and there was no linkage of behavior in that.
Let me go to you, Chris. In Jerusalem, Pompeo said that wherever Iranian operatives function in the Middle East or around the world, Secretary of State Pompeo said that the United States will go after them, that they are legitimate targets. Now, those are my words, but the idea is that they were going to go after Iranian operatives working to destabilize either the Middle East or other parts of the world. Your reaction?
Very significant, George, because, those that study Iran know that it has a terror network, not just here in the Middle East, but literally around the world. They finance Hezbollah, which has its tentacles in South America. So I think they're almost taking like an Israeli point of view that wherever Iranian operatives are acting, that they will go ahead and strike them. And I want to add one point that you talked about, George and Gary. I really think what sets this speech apart from everything we've heard for 8 years under the Obama administration is Pompeo speaking directly to the Iranian people and saying, speak up, we're behind you. Back in 2009, millions of people went to the streets in Iran and Tehran and around the country. Even last December, the same thing happened. And now I think you can have an administration that's going to speak up on behalf of the people who have been suppressed by the Islamic regime, not for really decades, almost 40 years next year. And one more point, Bernard Lewis, the expert on Islam, died just a couple of days ago. He predicted that Turkey would become an Islamic republic. He also predicted, and it hasn't come true yet, that because of the frustration with this radical Islam, that Iranians would eventually get a secular nationalistic state. I think the Trump administration is trying to fuel that passion among the Iranian people.
What are some of the key demands this White House is asking of the Iranian regime?
Well, the key demands are this, George. First and foremost, dismantle all nuclear ambitions, all nuclear program activities. In addition to that, eliminate all ballistic missile testing and development of ballistic missiles that can also be used against Israel and other states, whether you have a nuclear device on them or not. In addition to that, stop your support of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, also Hezbollah and Hamas, also your people and your bases in Syria that you've established. So basically, George, this is a big shift from what we've seen for the last 8 years, 8 or 9 years in the past under the Obama administration and early on in Trump's administration. It's a change. It's a shifting away from more of a accommodation of the Iranians to taking them on. And it even led some analysts and some in the media to say, wow, this Pompeo is more of a hawk than Trump is, and we're heading to war. And I don't think that's it. I don't think we're heading to war. I think they're imposing tough sanctions to see if those will work on the Iranian leadership.
What's the likelihood, Chris, that the Iranians are going to roll over and respond in a positive way to all these demands?
Well, I think that's very unlikely, George. Some people might say 2 chances, slim, and none. I think the Iranian regime, the mullahs, the ruling leaders of Iran, are gonna continue to in this vein that they have for almost 40 years, since 1979, from the Islamic Revolution. So I don't think we're going to see any change in the ruling mullahs. I don't think we may see them step back a little bit to calculate how far they can go with this new Trump administration guidelines, how they're dealing with Iran. I think what the Trump administration is trying to do is really speak to the Iranian people and see what they can do to foment a regime change. I don't necessarily see a military action by the United States, but I think they're speaking to the Iranian people and certainly doing what they can practically, like these extreme sanctions they're doing against the regime, to stop the funding of this all their warlike efforts throughout the Middle East.
Iranians are already suffering major time, right?
Well, they have been suffering for a long time, and you probably ran into this when you were there. I know I did. People saying these sanctions have to go. They're hurting us. But in addition to the sanctions that have been in place, George, we have unemployment there. It's probably close to 12%. The inflation rate in Iran is close to 10%. The Iranian people are really suffering from a poor economy. Now, they thought when the sanctions had been lifted and this deal was completed in 2015 that they'd have some relief. They haven't seen anything. There's been no economic gain for the people of Iran. It's all been in part in the pockets, all the money, the $150 billion of unfrozen assets, all in the pockets of their leaders. They admit that. They haven't seen any benefit, and they are really hurting there. As you know, the Iranian people are hurting. This is going to hurt them even more because, as you know as well, George, the leadership, when there are sanctions in place, they always seem to get what they want. Other than maybe having their assets frozen, they can still get plenty of things that they want in the international market. But let me say this, George. I think the key in all of this will be, will our allies in Europe and in the West go along with these sanctions? Now, the administration, the Trump administration, is saying if they do not, we will put sanctions on them.
But the idea is that the White House would encourage Iranians to rise up and take action against their government. What can you tell us about this?
Many people say that the fastest growing church in the world today may be inside Iran, where Iranians are coming to faith in Jesus Christ through dreams and visions. And many of them are so discontented with the sort of oppressive religious regime that is there, and they want freedom, and they're really thirsting. And I think what we're hearing now from Pompeo is this idea that we want to support this idea for freedom in Iran.
And as always, Chris Mitchell, our bureau chief in Jerusalem, thank you for your insights. On behalf of Gary, myself, I'm George Talent.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has agreed to allow members of Congress to see classified information from the DOJ's Russia meddling probe. His decision came after a meeting with President Trump at the White House. Rosenstein also agreed to investigate allegations that the FBI placed a spy inside the Trump presidential campaign. Within days, the DOJ's Inspector General is expected to release a highly anticipated report on the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Well, joining us to provide some insights is Tom Fitton. He is president of the Washington-based watchdog group Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks for joining us. So what are you expecting from the IG's report? Right now it's just speculation, but what do you think it'll reveal?
Well, I don't know which issues it's going to examine. It's going to examine the politicization of the Justice Department FBI investigation to protect Hillary Clinton, or is it going to focus on criticizing James Comey for speaking out of school as it relates to the Hillary Clinton email investigation, which is what which was the basis for Hillary Clinton's complaints about what he did. So if they're going to look at it from Hillary Clinton's perspective, Comey may come out looking bad for reasons that the conservative community doesn't expect or isn't necessarily ready for, as opposed to a full investigation into the Protect Hillary movement in the Justice Department and FBI with respect to her email scandal.
Now, a lot of conservatives there in Washington are expecting a bombshell, but of course liberals are saying, oh, no, no, no. Is it going to be anything significant, or is it just another one of these reports?
Well, no matter how you slice it, the FBI and Justice Department, their credibility is likely to take another hit. And the process was screwed up terribly by the Justice Department and FBI during the Obama administration. And things haven't been appropriately fixed yet, even during the Trump administration, because the Justice Department has put itself in a box with respect to how to run the deep state that's seemingly running that agency right now.
Of course, the big news coming out of the White House, the president has been tweeting up a storm about Spygate. How serious do you think that is, Tom? And what evidence do we have right now?
Well, it's super serious. The information that is out there suggests that Stephen Halper, who was working for the government, at least as a contractor, was serving as an informant/spy for the FBI and maybe even the CIA. He was trying to insinuate himself in the Trump campaign, paid money to one Trump campaign official, evidently, to try to get a relationship or a former relationship with him, even wanted to get a job on the Trump administration. So the questions are, why on earth was the FBI trying to spy on the Trump campaign? Did they have good reason, or was it just pretextual, meaning they were intervening improperly in the political campaign? And also, was the spy being used by Mueller's operation as well? Because the reports are that Mueller benefited from the intel the spy was able to glean on behalf of the FBI and CIA.
Now, FBI and justice officials have been reluctant to cooperate with you and your Freedom of Information Act requests, and they've only turned over documents to Congress under threat of contempt charges. Why have they been resisting shining light on these investigations, Tom?
Well, institutionally, they're protecting themselves, and the Mueller operation is Spygate, or is resulted from Spygate, the Clinton DNC dossier, the spying, the illicit targeting, the FISA warrants. All of that was part of an investigation that specifically was handed over to Robert Mueller. So all this criticism about spies and FISA and the dossier, it's all about Mueller, and the Justice Department is trying to protect him.
You recently received some more documents, emails, and what files did you receive? What have you learned from them? Well,
we received emails from the Justice Department and FBI showing that James Comey, right after he was fired, was working hand in glove with the FBI and DOJ on his testimony, his anti-Trump testimony back in last year. And the FBI told him to work with Mueller on the testimony as well. So it's interesting, this man gets fired by the FBI, but the emails show that he became almost immediately friendly with Mueller in terms of coordinating his testimony.
I know some of the FBI's Peter Strzok and Lisa Page text messages seem to show a possible White House political connection to the investigation during the campaign. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we've asked for the Peter Strzok Page text messages and emails, other communications. The FBI told us there are 15,000 pages of records, but they want to take up to 2 years to turn them over. But in the least, they've asked and promised Judicial Watch they would ask Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page to preserve any records they have on their personal devices, because our concern is they were avoiding FOIA by using personal devices to communicate about government business. But the stonewalling, the slow walking, it's par for the course. Congress is being obstructed, and so is Judicial Watch and the Freedom of Information Act. The American people want answers, and my view is the president should try to get the Justice Department and the FBI to comply with the law and release this information as quickly as possible.
The tragic school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas, has once again led Americans to call for solutions to end the mass murder of innocent students. Singer Kelly Clarkson said this about the shooting tragedy that occurred in her home state.
And tonight they wanted me to say that obviously we want to pray for all the victims, we want to pray for their families, but they also wanted me to do a moment of silence. And I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working.
So what can we do to better protect our schools and kids from these mass shootings? Here with some insights is John R. Lott Jr. He's an expert on crime and terrorism and president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Dr. Lott, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So what should we do to protect our school children? Arm teachers, repeal the Second Amendment, ban guns? What should we do?
Right. I suppose the most frustrating thing that I see after each of these tragedies is that people use it to go and push for gun control laws that have nothing to do with those particular attacks that just occurred. In fact, people are often offering solutions before we even know the facts of this particular case. One thing I'll point out is, since you mentioned armed teachers, we have 20 states now that to varying degrees allow teachers and staff to be able to carry. Texas has 200 schools that allow teachers and staff to carry. And but unfortunately, this wasn't one of them. Despite all the schools across the United States that have this, and some of them for decades now, there's never been one shooting at any of those schools. These attacks keep on occurring at other places. And, you know, there's, I think, a very important strategic reason why they do. Officers in uniform are helpful. They have almost a heroic job in these types of cases. The problem is that when you're in uniform, it's kind of like having a neon sign above you that says, shoot me first. Because these killers know if they can take out the person who they know is armed there, they will eliminate any opposition that they have. The advantage that you have of concealed handguns is that the killers don't know who it is that they have to go and worry about.
What about the idea of using retired veterans, maybe not putting them in uniform, but have them with concealed handguns, and they're skilled in firearms to man the school entranceways? Would that be a good idea?
Look, I have no problem with those types of things. The issue that you still have to deal with is whether somebody's in uniform or not. If they're readily identifiable as having their job being security that's there, then, you know, it's almost the same as if they were in uniform. If they know that there are other people that they can't identify who have guns to be able to go and protect themselves and others that are there, it actually makes the job of those who are there to guard, who are officially there to guard, safer. Because the killer knows if they start to go after that, it leaves them open to somebody who may be behind them or to the side, that they don't know whether that person can stop them or not.
Now, Dr. Lott, I know some teachers, many teachers actually, are opposed to this. I guess they don't trust their own colleagues, or they fear that students would get a hold of the gun or so forth. Is that a concern?
Look, as I said, we have 20 states now that actually have experience with teachers and staff carrying. You know, you have some states like Utah where 5% of the teachers carry and 10 to 12% of the staff carry. The types of concern that you just raised about losing control of the gun and somebody else getting a hold of it simply has never happened. I'm not saying it's not possible. If people go to our website at crimeresearch.org, we have dozens of cases in recent years where concealed carry permit holders around the country have stopped mass public shootings.
When I grew up in the 1960s and early 70s, we never had these mass school shootings, so why are we seeing so many now?
Well, I think it's a combination of different things that are going on. I think part of what's going on is we've always had people who have committed suicide. And in the past, they would just go and commit suicide. Someplace along the line, you've had people who wanted to get attention, who wanted to commit suicide, but now they realize that they can go and get national and international attention by the more people that they kill.
Finally, then, you know, a lot of pressure is expected to be placed on state officials, also on Congress because of another shooting. So
Right.
what should be done to transform our culture and start changing our thinking about this?
I think rather than having signs in front of schools that say this school is a gun-free zone, have signs in front of the schools that say selective teachers and staff are armed and will use their weapons in order to protect the students and themselves if an attack should arise. Would you put a sign like that in front of your own home? If you, God forbid, were being threatened with a stalker, where you or your family were being seriously threatened, would you feel safer putting a sign in front of your home that said your home was a gun-free zone? I don't think so. And yet that's the type of sign we put out in front of all these targets that we care so much about protecting. And that rather than making those places safer, those types of signs actually serve as a magnet for those attacks to occur.
Okay, Dr. John Lott Jr., author of the book, The War on Guns, and president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
For quite a few years now, DNA has been used as evidence to convict criminals and exonerate the innocent. Today, it's also being used to help determine people's food allergies, match them with their soulmates, or discover their ancestors. But what happens to all that DNA information? What's being done to protect our genetic material and privacy rights? Well, here to set us straight is Matt Nye. He's chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus. Matt, thanks for joining us. So tell us, what is California doing with people's genetic material?
Well, yeah, California is actually one of the states where they store the genetic material indefinitely, and they're actually selling the material to researchers to, cover the cost of the storage and things like that. So, it's a little disconcerting in the sense that the parents don't have the opportunity to opt in. This is actually a federally mandated practice that goes back to 2007. It's called the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act. So this has actually been going on since 2008 when it was signed into law by President Bush. And you don't have an option, and most times parents don't even know it's happening. They're supposed to give you the option to request that the sample be destroyed, but that appears to happen in a very small percentage of the cases. The parents essentially don't know that the infant was tested, and they don't know they have the option to ask for the sample to be destroyed.
Well, what do they do with this sample, with the DNA?
Well, they're screening for congenital and hereditary defects. So there are anywhere from, I think, 29 to almost 50 different things they can screen for now. And so it is, the practice is very helpful from a research standpoint, and it does save lives. They estimate, 5,000 to 6,000 lives minimum per year are saved because of the screening practice. So it's done with the best of intentions, but because the fact that it's compulsory really is the issue. I don't think the government should be collecting that data without consent from the parents.
Well, I know California is often a political and cultural trailblazer for the rest of the nation. So why should we be concerned? It seems to me there's a privacy issue here.
There's definitely a privacy issue, and that's what there are cases where the material was sold to a researcher, and the baby's name is still attached to the DNA sample, right? So your privacy just went right out the window there. In general, government and large organizations don't have a very good track record of protecting this type of data. You see every day on the news, you've got breaches of extremely large corporations. It is, very disconcerting.
Okay, Matt, what is the Republican Liberty Caucus hoping to do about it?
Well, obviously, we're for privacy rights. The best thing that could happen would be to repeal the original bill from 2007, 2008 that actually makes this possible. I don't see anybody, that's going to run a repealer bill on something like that. So I'm afraid we're stuck with it. So about the best you can do now is try to insist on notification, that the parents be notified that this is happening, and make sure they are aware that they have the option to have the sample destroyed.
Well, is there any support in Congress at all about trying to nullify this law or have a new one that would address some of the concerns?
Not at this time. I mean, you have the traditional libertarian and privacy rights type folks, but no, there's no. It just goes back to how do you argue? I'm talking about from a purely political standpoint. How do you argue against testing that could save the lives of newborns. I think that's the challenge. Is it's a very, difficult political argument to make.
Well, maybe having the DNA destroyed, mandating that by law after a certain period of time.
Absolutely.
How about discussions with President Trump? Any idea how he feels about this?
That I do not. No, do not.
Well, in the meantime, Matt, what should people do then to protect their DNA privacy rights? I mean, now you can check for allergies through DNA, ancestry, even your soulmate match, and who knows where that information goes, how it's being used. What do we do?
Yeah, well, and there's one other issue I didn't touch on real quick is the insurance aspect. If your health insurance company pays for the test, and a lot of times they do, now they will know if your baby is predisposed for some type of illness or disease. And so you've got that whole aspect too. But like I say, the best thing you can do is go in forearmed. You know that they're doing that test because it's mandatory, and you request that they delete the sample. I mean, that's the main thing. It's the classic knowledge is power.
President Trump has canceled his summit with Kim Jong-un scheduled for Singapore June 11th. During an Oval Office meeting with South Korean President Moon, Mr. Trump appeared skeptical about meeting with the Korean dictator as originally planned.
There's a very substantial chance that it won't work out, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it won't work out over a period of time.
The president has made two big mistakes with Kim Jong-un. Number one, Trump trusts him to keep his word. Why? When has Kim ever proved trustworthy? What makes him more trustworthy than the mullahs in Iran? Whether they're Islamic or communist, dictators cannot be trusted. They'll tell you what you want to hear. They'll do one thing while promising another. They're a little like many of the establishment swamp creatures that Donald Trump wants to purge from Washington, D.C. So watch what the Little Rocket Man does, not what he says. Like his father, the North Korean dictator will play nice, stop missile testing and nuclear development temporarily. But then when the Western money runs out, in actuality legal bribes, he'll restart his program in hopes of extorting more. The president's other big mistake, holding military exercises with South Korea immediately after North Korea freed 3 Americans from prison. Kim demonstrated goodwill by doing that. Trump did not when he proceeded with joint military drills near the border. And I still can't help but wonder, what did Kim Jong-un get in return for releasing those American hostages? Can you understand that one? Well, there must have been a price to be paid. Yes, most Americans hope and pray for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Many of our fathers and grandfathers fought and died to keep the South free. But, Mr. President, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. We've been down this road before with North Korea. Please don't fall into the same trickery that entrapped America in the past. By averting that, you may not win the Nobel Peace Prize, but you will accomplish more than any of your presidential predecessors. Proverbs 3:35 tells us, "The wise inherit honor, but fools get only shame." So let's pray for wisdom and honor for our president, our allies, and for our elected leaders. Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.